we have participants from the private school, and also we have participants from Benguet State University and the professors of Benguet State University. Welcome to our ninth knowledge sharing series. Our ninth knowledge sharing series is or has two sessions. The first session is revisiting project-based learning, and this will be run by no less than one of the experts in educational technology. We have Liezl Formilleza, Dunuan, who is currently the program manager of Connected Women, also an organization that does remote work. I met her sometime 10 years ago when we worked on delivering training programs on educational technology. And one of the programs that she has been running is on World Links, which also does a lot of problem-based learning activities. So we are excited today to be with her. She is Baguio-based right now, and she works online. Most of her job would require her to be online. We are excited to hear from her, especially as we revisit problem-based learning at the time that we are all in need of running sessions like this, as we foresee that the light that online learning may also be one of the modalities of how we will deliver K-12 curriculum. So good morning once again. For all your questions, please post them on the chat box, and then we will process it from there. We also encourage everyone we'll encourage everyone to please sign in our attendance sheet that's being posted on our chat box. So good morning and welcome, Ma'am Liezl.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well despite our situation, and we pray actually that everyone is staying safe and healthy with their families wherever you are. I know that it's been a difficult month, a little over a month for everyone, and especially teachers, because I know that the struggle. For example, when we locked down, the struggle really was how do we help our students cope, and after a month, we suddenly realized that we may not be going back to how we used to do things, how we used to teach, how we used to work with our students, how we used to work with our co-teachers. So it's really something that the whole month probably has gotten us thinking what it is how we're gonna cope. And I think the Department of Education is in a good position to guide teachers at this point, because we are after all the frontliners when it comes to the education sector. So we feel that there are things that we need to prepare for. So I hope my talk this morning will give you some ideas um, on how we can move forward and how we can think of ways to bring education to our kids. I myself, just to give you up so that you know me better in terms of I'm based here in Baguio. I send my 13-year-old child, a girl, to a public school. She studies at Joaquin Smith National High School. We live in Asin Road. My husband is Ifugao. So we live here in Asin Roads, and I actually also sent her to a public elementary school here in our area. So I'm a believer in the public schools sector. So I know that there's a lot of potential, and especially with the K to 12 curriculum, I know that the K to 12 curriculum offers a lot of opportunities as well for learning for our kids. So now I'd like to focus my talk a bit on project based learning. Project based learning has been around for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, I think If some of you have gotten previous trainings from groups like Microsoft, from groups like Intel, I'm sure you've heard of the term project-based learning. Uh, and that was like 10 years ago. Tama si Soraya. I met her when she was still the principal of the Cordillera Regional Science High School, and we were doing a project together, training teachers on project-based learning. So at that time, the internet was not that good. It's better now, considerably. But during that time, the struggle really was more with the technology, and second, with the use of that strategy by the teachers. So I'd like to share my screen so that we can, and I hope you can see my screen. Hold on, let me just open my. Seem to have lost my PowerPoint. Hold on. Okay. I hope you can bear with me. I'm having some technical difficulties. Hold on. But then as I was saying, the issue really right now is giving ourselves, the time to actually rethink the way we teach, and also rethink the way our students learn, because at this point everything has changed, and but there is something that we can still do, and of course that requires a lot of preparation, meaning we can't just go in and go in unprepared. So I hope a lot of you have done are familiar with project-based learning. So let me see. Okay, so I will see if I can. Can you see my screen already? It's my PowerPoint presentation.
Yes po, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me just start. So my talk is about revisiting project-based learning. So educating in the new normal. Are you able to see my PowerPoint, or are you able to see the presenter slide?
Presenter slide, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, because that's what I see. Sorry, let me just fix this. Hold on. I can't seem to find.
On the display setting, ma'am.
Yes, I have to, because na mablock kasi ng Zoom bar yung. No,
Yes po.
okay na? Can you
Okay,
see it?
okay
Okay.
po.
Sige. So we want to look at the visiting project-based learning, and as a possibility of using this in education in the new normal, because that's what we call how we are these days. So basically, what I want to look at is, ano ba tong new normal? What is this new normal that we're talking about? We are saying that initially we thought that if we, after the ECQ, after the lockdown, we can, literally go back to how we do things, but apparently not. Up until we find what do you call this? We find a vaccine or a cure for COVID-19. We really can't go back to how we used to do things. So this means social distancing. This means lesser big groups. And for public schools, this is quite a challenge, because we know that public schools, generally speaking, have large populations and you have large class sizes. So it's going to be difficult to go back to normal. So this new normal imposes a lot of challenges, especially to the public school system. So what does that mean for work? For teachers, what does that mean? When we had the lockdown, you already experienced working this thing that we call working from home. Diba? Alam na natin yan kasi for the first weeks, we were reacting, we were saying, what is this, what's happening. But then eventually, when the department started making announcements about, what we will do with the end of the school year, if classes will resume, if graduations will resume, etc., then we got pushed, you got pushed into this working from home setup. I'm not sure if every single teacher had that experience, but I think at least for division officials, for principals, you had your first taste of working from home. Using tools, using Zoom, using email more frequently, doing video conferencing calls more frequently. That is the new normal for work. People who are set up at home and doing as much work as they can and trying to be productive while they're working from home. So that has challenges, mind you. We know that, for example, since the kids are not in school, that means the kids are at home with you. So that actually also means that there's an impact on your productivity because the kids are home with you. You have to deal with the fact that they have to also do their own thing so that you can work. And of course, there are additional challenges. So for teaching and learning, what does that mean? We heard a lot of talk about, let's do things online. Let's do online learning. But that also imposes a lot of challenges because not everyone is online. Yung mga nasa bundok nasa mga munisipyo sa halimbawa sa Ifugao, ilan lang ang may access sa internet. No? So that it in itself poses a problem if you want your students to do online learning. I think you've also heard about SLU, making that announcement that without talking about whether they're going to refund tuition fees or not, but actually saying that students should finish their classes and submit all of the requirements online without. I'm not sure if they were able to address the fact that not all of their students also have access to the internet. So those are the challenges. And it also changes the way we teach. For those who've gone through training on using technology in education, you know that teaching and learning using technology is not that simple. No. There has to be a change in the paradigm. There has to be a change in your strategy in order for you to effectively use technology in learning and teaching. So these are some of the things that we are dealing with right now in this new normal. So okay. So maybe I could ask, if you can, Haris, would you be able to share the poll? I can
Yes, ma'am.
stop my screen sharing in the meantime so that you can, please, I'd like to call on everyone to uh, answer the poll that Harris will put up. It's basically, I hope you see it. It basically is asking you how you're how familiar you are with project-based learning, how you've received, whether you've received training before, and whether you've actually implemented it. So I hope everyone sees the poll. Okay. Okay, I see people answering questions. Okay. I'm looking at my other screen, sorry. Okay. We have 266 participants. Wow. This is a big meeting. Thank you for inviting me here, sir. So we have 110. Thank you. Please just answer as fast as you can so that we can, get an idea. And I think this will also be useful for the division office because you'll be able to see, familiarity in the strategy. We are now looking at 55% no, saying no. And okay, let's just wait. We're almost there. We're almost there. We have close to 200 answering the question. Okay. But in terms of receiving training, it would be good for the division to know that of the participants, only 10% have received project-based learning training, and a little over 90% have not. We're almost there. 70% have voted. I wonder if there are teachers here or from Joaquin Smith. %75 have voted. Okay, hold on. Let's wait a little bit more. Kasi baka yung iba nahihirapan mag-vote. I'll cut the poll I'll end the poll at 4 minutes so that, we'll have more time to discuss. So by that time, we'll have about 80% who voted, which is a good number of okay, we're almost there. 30 seconds more. And Sir Harris, can you see if you can publish, show the results from your end?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay, sige. Thank you. Tsaka it might be also good for you to save it. Kasi for your own So okay. I think we can end polling now so that we can, I'll end it na ha.
Sige, ma'am.
Okay.
Yan.
Okay. Oh, I can actually share it pala from here. Okay, yeah, go ahead. So, does everyone see the results on the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, if you notice, not 56% said that they're not familiar with it. 44% are familiar, or at least have heard of it. But in terms of receiving training, you've only gotten 10% have received training. 90% of the attendees have not. And those who've implemented PBL in their classrooms is also small, 21%, with 79% saying that they haven't. But I'll also clarify, because you may see project-based learning as something that's it's different from implementing projects in your classroom. Definitely. So let me just continue sharing my screen. Okay. So we did that, no? Short poll tayo. And I wanted to find out how many of you are familiar with. But it seems that in terms of training, mukhang doon tayo kulang, and we can actually remedy that somehow, and it doesn't have to be a training wherein you're gathered all together in one room, which is not possible anymore unless the situation changes. But I think we can still do online training. There are a lot of online resources that you can look at. Okay, so sige. So let's go to what is project-based learning. Some of you mentioned that you've done project-based learning in your classrooms, but it's also possible that you are referring to projects as projects and not project-based learning, because project-based learning is a very specific teaching method. It's constructivist in its origins. It basically it believes that students learn better by doing. You learn by doing. So project-based learning is a teaching method in which students gain knowledge and skills. So that's knowledge and skills by working on an extended period of time to investigate and respond to an authentic, engaging, and complex question, problem, or challenge. So there's a big difference between asking students to do a project in class. For example, at the end of each grading period, I'm sure for every grading period, each subject has a project, and that project has a corresponding grade for that grading period. But that project may not necessarily be project-based learning. And I'll show you later what the difference is. Kasi dito pa lang sa definition na to, it requires you to plan properly and then to actually give the students a real world problem that they need to solve. And another thing is, most of the time, project-based learning requires them to work in groups. So student collaboration is important in project-based learning. So if you don't mind, I'll answer your questions after the session. So I'll just go through the chat, or maybe I'll ask some of the facilitators from the division office to pick the questions that are common that I can answer. Okay, so I hope this works. This is actually a video of how project-based learning is in action. It's a video that is about a high school class in the US, and it also shows you the steps that they take in project-based learning and the elements that they consider. So I hope it works. No, let's try it. Harris, let me know na lang if you can hear the audio, kasi it should work. Let me see if I'm able to share computer sound. I'll just share my computer sound so that you can see. Okay, I'm gonna play it.
How can we as historians design a virtual civil rights museum app that will preserve the Nashville influence on the civil rights movement? So throughout this whole process, I want you to think of yourself as an historian. Students are going to create a virtual museum app looking at the civil rights movements that happened in Nashville. So we're going to focus on the Nashville sit-ins, we're going to focus on the public desegregations of schools, and we're going to focus on what happened after the Nashville civil rights movement.
It was the most deeply rooted in nonviolence.
The app we're using is called Think Link. All the students find a background picture that relates to their topic. And then what they do is they tag different things on top of that background picture. So our entry event was a field trip to our Nashville Public Library, and there they have the Civil Rights exhibit.
I want you guys to look at the pictures, look at who's in the middle, look at who's on the sides, look at their faces, at their hands, and try to figure out what's happening.
We looked at some primary sources.
That is John Lewis about to get arrested, and he is telling the police his rights.
The kids were able to look at some artifacts and have a discussion about the things that happened during the civil rights movement here in Nashville.
How do you feel about touching something that is almost 50 years old? History in the palm of your hand.
My job as a teacher is to get them excited like I'm excited about the project. And that's one way to engage the students and get their minds to start thinking about what they're going to create.
And now we're going to look at a particular book. This book is going to guide our work for our project.
We started looking at the book March by John Lewis. And in this book, he talks about his journey from childhood to the civil rights movement and the part that he played.
And then it tells me the story is called March. So why do you think the authors did it that way?
The point of view of how it started off when he was marching.
Okay, so you think he's giving us his point of view. Oh, he said point of view. Let's talk about point of view. What types of point of view do we have? First person. So first person, second person, third omniscient.
So I thought that would be a really good idea if we read his book to get our minds set on what actually happened in Nashville.
We got to create our need to know list.
And then we created our need to know list. This is the things that they want to know from reading about John Lewis from our field trip.
What's your question?
I was John Lewis remained a devoted advocate of the philosophy of nonviolence.
This is a list what they want to find out at the end. So we're going to go through that list. We're going to mark through the things that we found out. We could always add to the list. The clock is a way for my students to collaborate and talk to each other. So what I do is we set appointments.
I learned that the lunch counter, the lunch counter we were sitting at was the lunch counter in the sit-ins.
So it's just a way for them to get feedback, talk to each other, get them to move, stay on topic, but talk to one of your classmates. So that's why I use the clock.
I want you to take about a few minutes to journal down what did you learn, how was the experience, what did you like, what did you want more of. So just
reflecting is a big part for me because that gets them to think. During this time in my classroom, I have different levels of students where they're at, and this book is a kind of a higher level book. So they read silently, and after they read silently, then they journal about what they learned. And I think reading and writing go hand to hand. That has them be able to retain the information about the book.
This was the first day of school in Nashville in 1957. This was the first day that African American children and white children went to school together.
We invited Dr. Melnick from the Historical Commission, and she was able to take what we had already learned and add to it.
This lady right here with the glasses, this is Diane Nash.
I did like the fact that she did bring in some more primary sources and pictures, which was very enlightening for our kids.
Explain to me how that photo goes with your topic. Because I see Martin Luther King and they look like Lyndon B. Johnson. So does that go with school segregation? So that means this is a scratch.
I think having her there actually helped me as a teacher realize that my students were kind of off topic a little bit. So with me having to do a checkpoint saying, okay, let me look at your pictures to see, are you kind of on the same pathway that she was on? And my kids wasn't. During our work time, the kids continue to work on the app, adding their tags, adding more information to what they want to display for their virtual museum app.
My topic is Nashville sit-ins, and I chose this background picture because it's showing a really detailed sit-in that they did.
They also did a charrette protocol, and with the charrette protocol allowed them to talk to a peer that's not on their team and get feedback. What do I need to add to my app? What do I need to delete?
This is interesting because how you put pictures on where you can see most.
The presenter is now listening to all this feedback and suggestions. And this gives the students an opportunity to get feedback other than from an adult.
I chose this background picture of the sit-ins because this tells you about the sit-ins and they're not using violence. This is where they learned their techniques on how to not be violent.
We had a panel today of 6 people. I had one person from our school, which was our media specialist. I had 2 historians, a TSU professor, and Dr. Melnick, who was here with us before from the Historical Commission. And then I had 3 central office people. One worked with technology, one was from the STEM department, and the other is from our social studies department. I asked them to come in and listen to the kids present.
I wonder if you guys are aware that many of the Freedom Riders are still around.
And my expectation was for them to use the presentation rubric from the Buck Institute and give the kids feedback.
You've made it really relevant and easy to navigate around with all the images, the pictures, the videos that you found and you put right in there. So
I think that's the most important part for the kids, because now it gets me to thinking, using that feedback that you got from your peers and from the panel. What do you want to change before you submit it to me for a grade?
What I learned from this was that Nashville has a lot of history. It's not all about country music.
Benefit for me to have them present in front of a panel is to showcase themselves. I think sometimes the kids that I service don't have that opportunity to shine.
Many of the sites that are important in the story are still around. You can visit the public square where Diane Nash confronted Mayor West. And it's real interesting because when you go to these places, you get a kind of a sense of what they went through.
Okay, thank you for watching that. This video is available. Just look for PBL Works online, and they have different types of videos available, which shows you what the steps are in project-based learning and how teachers use it in their classroom. So, if I were to ask you, is this something that you've done before in your classroom? If you're talking about project, quote unquote, vis-a-vis project-based learning, that may not be the case, because just to compare, yung tinatawag nating projects sa classroom, usually ang tawag ng PBL Works dyan, dessert. It's not a main course. The main course is project-based learning. And here is the comparison. No? So usually yung mga projects natin, add-on siya, dinadagdag natin siya dun sa particular unit. Tapos minsan, ano siya, we know that we ask the kids to be creative, to do dioramas, to do all of these things. And usually it's individual. Kadalasan, you follow the direction of the teacher. It's the teacher who tells you what to do. No? And it's focused, doing a project is focused on the product. So if you compare it, for example, to project-based learning, yung project-based learning, you do it alongside the unit. So for example, in a grading period, you cover several units. One unit you can tackle that using project-based learning. And that everything is integrated there. Nakita nyo naman dun sa video that some of the lessons, the scaffolding lessons that they did was they talked to a historian, they went to visit a museum. So that's all part of the class. No? So it's not something extra. It's not an add-on, so it's important. It's also, project-based learning is also driven by student inquiry. You let the students answer a particular question, answer a problem, and pose a solution. It's also, project-based learning is also focused on product and process as well. If you noticed in the video, the teacher keeps on checking on them, where they are, how they're doing, whether they're on task. That whole process of checking is part of project-based learning. So unlike a project, you just tell your student, this is what you will do. You're supposed to submit it a few days from now. Go do it. There's no interaction in between. So going back to doing a project, if more often than not, it's unrelated to standards and skills that you've set for that particular unit. Project-based learning, on the other hand, is centered on academic standards and success skills. So as the student does the project, does PBL, you're hitting knowledge and skills that you're trying to achieve in that particular unit. That's why it's important to plan using the learning objectives that you've set for that particular unit when you do project-based learning. So I mentioned also before, if you're having kids do a project, they usually do it alone, and you usually ask them to do it at home. In case of project-based learning, student collaboration is important, and they have to have regular check-ins with their teacher. Palagi silang may chance na magtanong sa teacher nila about what they're doing. For projects in itself, they only remain in the school world. So usually, dinidisplay nyo lang dyan sa tabi, and it's not something that actually helps you solve a problem or allows your students to use the knowledge that they have to create solutions for a certain problem, which is very real has a real world context. And lastly, yung end result ng projects, usually yun na nga, dinidisplay, pinapakita, present. In the case of project-based learning, it's usually done with a public audience, meaning you actually have other people listening to the kids present what they've done. In the case of the video, they showed their output to a group of historians and teachers, and they got feedback while they were doing the presentation. So I hope that's clear what the difference is. So siguro when we go back to the question, how many have done PBL? Knowing what we know now, it's possible that the percentage may go down a bit. So, but of course, that's how we've gotten used to doing projects in our own classrooms. So, okay. So now we talk about the 7 essential project design elements of project-based learning. This particular material, I can share this with you, but I'll also share at the end of the presentation my resources for this, because this is all available online. So for example, in this case, if you see the wheel, what is in the middle? In the middle or in the center of it all, you always go back to your learning goals. What key knowledge do the students need to get? What understanding do they need to get? And what success skills do they need to have? Success skills is important because that's the non-academic, so to speak. That's usually the skills that they get from collaboration, from inquiry, from problem solving, which are what we've always considered as skills that they need for the future. So what's the first element? The first element is, sorry, lumabas din yung pangalawa. Anyway, never mind. So the first element is the question mark here. Challenging, you must pose a challenging problem or a question. And that challenging problem or a question has to be real. It has to be like, for example, yung mga usual natin na, how do you solve the solid waste management problem in your barangay? That's one. No? So, but you also have to consider that the problem that you pose must be appropriate for their level. So, when you ask a group of students in grade 3 or grade 4 to think about how they can solve the solid waste management problem in their barangay, the way you present it is definitely going to be different than when you present it to a group of grade 10 students. So you have to consider the level of your students when you present problems that they will have to tackle in project-based learning. The second design element is that your students have to be asking all the time. You have to guide them as they go through asking questions, looking for resources, and applying the information that they get from whatever research they've done. The teacher is there to guide. But this is a student-centered strategy. And remember that when you present the problem, it has to be easy enough for them to see a real world context. And it should also be relevant to them on a personal level or even at the community level, no? So dapat yung mga issues ninyo hindi masyadong familiar sa kanila. So okay. The next two elements, first, it's important when you plan a project-based learning approach, you have to consider at what point the students will have a voice and a choice, meaning they can choose, for example, what output they want to do based on their preference, but you still offer them that choice. No? Ibig sabihin, you're not gonna ask them, all of them, to do the same thing, which may be difficult, but if you plan it properly, kayang gawin. At all points of the project-based learning, students and teachers are able to reflect on what kind of learning is happening. If you remember in the video, the teacher was mentioning that at some point, she thought that the kids were not, on task or hindi tama yung ginagawa nila. So she had to create an instance wherein she could check and give them feedback so that they can get back on track. Ika nga, no? So that's important. And it just doesn't happen once in the whole process. It has to happen regularly. Okay. So again, students get feedback and then they are able to apply the feedback and improve on their the outputs for their project-based learning. Finally, when we talk about presentation, there's a public product that you want your students to show. In the case of the video, they showed it was a virtual museum using photographs. No? Ang advantage, of course, ng US sa atin is that they have access to all of these technologies. But that doesn't mean that we can't do it. We can't do something similar. There are still tools that we can access. And it's really a matter of finding out what these tools are and using them appropriately. Because it doesn't also make sense to force the use of a tool when it doesn't help us achieve our learning objectives. We always go back to what the learning objectives are for that particular unit that you are trying to achieve using project-based learning. That always has to be where we go back to. Okay? So, okay. In relation to the design elements, there are teaching practices that we have to remember. This is for us, the teachers. We need to remember this. This is also in the resources of pblworks.org. It's free. You can sign up so that you can get access to this. Even if you're a member, you can see this still. No? So it's useful for you because these are really the steps. But let us not look at it na linear, because that's why it's in a circle like this, because at some point we need to do certain things na sabay or not necessarily one after the other. Okay? So when it comes to project-based teaching practices that are gold standard, first of all, teachers have to plan from start to finish the whole project and make sure that you at some point, give room for the students to share what it is they want to do and how they're going to do it. So there's still room for flexibility. Hindi siya rigid. This is why it's called student-centered learning. You give opportunity for the student to take part in the actual learning. So, and then secondly, you have to align it to standards. You have to use your standards. In this case, the standards that are set by the K-12 curriculum, you always go back to that. Always go back to the learning objectives that are set for that particular unit in the curriculum. Without that to guide you, there's no sense doing project-based learning. You always go back to the learning goals. Okay, so for the next one, build the culture. So this is it. No? You have to build a culture of independence among your students. You have to be able to guide them to become in to become people who inquire, people who ask questions, and people who see that working together or collaborating with each other is going to help them in doing the project. Another important thing is, because we always sometimes nakakalimutan natin to yung attention to quality and excellence in the work. When you talk about project-based learning, it's not just, hindi siya basta-basta. Ibig sabihin, when you talk about PBL, the product has to be excellent. It has to adhere to the standards of research and even your own standards. No? Dapat hindi siya yung pinagsama-sama na lang and okay na yan. Never settle for okay na yan or anything that's mediocre when you talk about PBL. And you'll be able to see this in your students as well. Okay, so ang role ng teacher sa project-based learning is really to be on top of the tasks, the schedules, the tech checkpoints, and the deadlines. And they also have to make sure that students are able to meet the deadlines, no? And they're not having issues with the deadlines. Remember in the video, there were opportunities for the students to get additional input. Apart from the teacher, they had a chance to go to the museum. They had a chance to talk to a historian. These strategies you need to think about as a teacher, because this will scaffold the learning of your students. So you cannot just give them the project and tell them go and find. That's not the case. At some point you have to offer resources that they can listen to, they can ask questions. At some point you really have to offer that, otherwise your project will fail. Okay, last two. Now, Soraya mentioned earlier how important it is to assess, no? Because in learning, the best way really for you to find out if a child is learning is, of course, to assess them. In the case of project-based learning, standardized assessments such as tests, quizzes, etc., may not work, may not be able to measure. But you have to think about ways to assess them in a more authentic way. For example, if you've heard about authentic assessment, that's basically the use of rubrics, that's the use of checklists. Those are the main things that you can use. And among the things that you assess is not just learning. You also have to assess how students work together, how students collaborated, all of these things. No? The skills, the success skills that we are after, we have to find a way to assess them. And authentic assessment will help us do that. And lastly, another important teaching practice when you're doing PBL is for you to continue engaging and coaching your students. In the video, we saw how the teacher did that. No? She finds a way to gather her students, to get feedback, and to encourage them. Because essentially, kayo yung cheerleader ng mga estudyante so that they will be able to finish the project. So okay, we'll share this a bit more. I'll share the resources later, but I'd like to actually ask, no, at this point, we'll have those who actually are able to chat. Let me see. I'm gonna ask the folks from the division office to share or to tell me if there are any questions that was posted in the chat. before I actually ask questions, because it's this part of my talk will ask you to, tell me what you think will be the challenges of project-based learning in public schools. Meron bang mga tanong so far?
Good morning,
Yes,
once
ma'am.
again,
Good
Miss Liezl.
morning. Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Ma'am, we have here a question. Number one is that how will PBL works in a class ranging from 30 to 50 pupils with an hour or more slot per subject area?
Is there anything else and any other question related to that?
And then number two, what is the difference between project-based learning, problem-based learning, ma'am?
Okay. I'll answer the second one first. Uh, Problem-based learning is a bigger strategy. It's a bigger approach. It really talks about teaching problem-solving skills to your students. And you can do problem-based learning by doing project-based learning. So project-based learning can be a strategy to do problem-based learning. So the difference between the two is obvious. Yung isa kasi is really more approaching solving a problem. No? So, but project-based learning can be uh, an approach to problem-based learning, meaning you ask them to tackle a specific problem in a real world context, but it can be something else. It doesn't have to be a problem. It can be a real world uh, real world action. Like for example, if you were agriculturists, for example, what would you do? How would you do a certain thing? No, so that doesn't necessarily address a problem, but project-based learning can help you do problem-based learning. Merong relationship yung dalawa. But problem-based learning is more geared towards teaching problem-solving skills to students. And you can approach that in so many ways. One of them can be project-based learning. So I hope I answered that. The first question, tama yan. Challenging talaga gawin ang project-based learning in the public schools. I know for a fact na 30, mababa pa yan. 30 na students, mababa pa yan. When I was doing training for schools in Cebu, in the Visayas, they had as many as 65 students, 75 students in a class. So, naiintindihan ko yung challenge na yan. But remember, project-based learning is not just something you do in one class session. No? Extended period of time, you have to plan it. So for example, in a grading period, no, for example, in a grading period, you have to cover several units in your curriculum. Tama? So you can decide which unit you want to do a project-based learning approach of. No? So then that unit, if it requires you to finish that unit, say, for example, in a month, then that is the period where you will do your project-based learning. So you have to manage your class sessions in such a way that you cover everything you need to do to prepare your kids to do project-based learning for that month. No? So imagine niyo kung ang klase ninyo ay twice a week, 1 hour. So you have then in a month's time, you only have 8 sessions more or less. No, tama ba? Yes, 8 sessions more or less. So in those 8 sessions, you have to plan it in such a way na nagagawa nyo lahat ng mga elements ng project-based learning. And towards the end, you'll be able to achieve yung pinapagawa ninyong output for the students. So that's the best way that you can. Look at it not on a per class, per session basis, but look at it on a longer term, longer duration. Kasi nga, ang project-based learning is you have to do it over an extended period of time and not just a few class sessions. So I hope I answered that. Are there any other questions with regards to that? Kasi alam ko, very real yung challenge na yan. And then, of course, the other
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am, for the answer. Another question, ma'am, we have here is that, is PBL same as inquiry-based?
They have similarities, yes. Because essentially, project-based learning is led by student inquiry. No? If you can actually search online on what is inquiry-based learning and project-based learning, they will turn up to be similar. No? But and they have similar strategies. No? But it's entirely up to you, however you want to call it. It's essentially thinking of a way to engage your students more, motivate them to learn more, and motivate them also to be part of the learning and creating process. So, kaya nga tinatawag natin siyang student-centered learning. Yeah. So, meron pa? Ang gaganda ng mga questions niyo.
Yes, ma'am. We still have 2 more. We have here now, is there some time frame as to the implementation of PBL for a certain project?
I cannot say because it will depend on what learning unit you are going to do. You're going to use project-based learning on. That will require you to plan on by yourself. No? So as I mentioned, if you want to cover a unit in a grading period, and that unit essentially requires you to have it covered within a month, then let's just say that 1 month is going to be your duration for that project. But again, it's really dependent on what you're teaching and what learning goals you're going to cover. Hindi siya one size fits all, ika nga, and it depends on what subject you're teaching also. Yeah. So maybe we can set another, and I think you can actually look for additional resources online on that, on how you can do that. Yeah. There's one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We have here, what would be the best approach to students who miss opportunities since it is an extended learning?
What would be a good opportunity for students? In the case of project-based learning, I'm going to speak of it as, using PBL, for example. In the case of PBL, they work together in groups. You ask your students to work together in groups. The best way, for example, for a group to deal with absenteeism or kids who don't participate as much or aren't as motivated to participate would be to think of roles that each of them will play in a group and assign those roles according to yung preferences ng mga bata. For example, there are kids who are visual learners. They don't like to read so much. They only like to watch things, but they're good in picking up things when they watch something, So if there's a role for them to play that allows them to do that, then give them that role in a group. There also are other members of the group who may be a bit more shy, but have skills that they can bring to the group. So parang kaya din natin tinatawag na yung project-based learning also allows the teacher to look at what are the different learning styles of the kids in the group and offer strategies to get them motivated to learn and to participate. So that's the benefit of using project-based learning. I can't really say much for, kasi ngayon we know that we are not yet, when you go back to school or when you open school in August, it may not be the usual, they come in and they stay in school for the whole day and they have classes. I don't think that's going to be it's going to be that easy to implement, and it may be a thing that will require you to have the students just get some of the learning resources, some of that from school, and then do it at home. No, so essentially, but there are still chances wherein you can still provide checkpoints. They check in with you, as I mentioned earlier. I know it's a bit controversial to use social media in your teaching, but now I think there must be a way for us to actually make use of social media to provide opportunities for our kids, our classes, to get in touch with us, get in touch with you as teachers, because that's the only way. Wala tayong opportunity. I mean, it can't be, they can't text you, they can't call you. Social media is easier for most of them. No? For most of them. But then, there are other issues with regards to kids who don't have connectivity at all. Pero, pero yun yung isa sa mga pwede nating tingnan. So I hope I answered that question. Meron pa ba?
Yes, ma'am, we have another question. Pwede po bang pakilinaw po na bakit ang standardized test will not measure the skills if PBL is used?
Okay. Why? One, standardized tests are not able to measure how well they collaborated, how well they communicated, their communication skills, how well they put together a project. No, yung 21st century skills ang hindi na measure na standardized tests. No, na measure na standardized test is knowledge, level of knowledge. That's it. No, but it's sayang kasi if you do PBL and you don't measure how much of the success skills they've gotten from the whole approach. So I'm not saying not to use it. I'm saying that you use it, but add on authentic assessment strategies as well, so that you get the whole picture of how project-based learning helped achieve learning goals and at the same time help them learn 21st century skills. Yeah.
Another one we have, ma'am. What suggestion can you give on how to conduct authentic assessment to students who are really shy to speak or have difficulty expressing themselves?
In that case, you can have, kasi authentic assessment doesn't necessarily have to be, something that requires them to speak. You can ask them to, what do you call this? You can ask them to be evaluated by a peer. There's what we call peer evaluation rubrics. You can also ask them to assess themselves. There's also a self-evaluation rubric that you can put together. So that means they don't need to talk at all. They just need to, look at the rubric and give the appropriate scores. And then as far as interaction is concerned, they only need, in peer evaluation, they only need to talk to, their classmate and not necessarily the whole class. So that's one way that authentic assessment can help kids who are a bit shy and have difficulty expressing themselves. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much for answering the questions too, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Activities. Oh, okay. Yeah. I saw another one. I just opened my chat. I'd like to say hi to Ma'am Remedios Quino. Hi, Ma'am. I used to be a parent of a student who graduated from Pakday. so in terms of using, there are a lot of templates of project-based learning in online. Ang sobrang dami. Kasi nga ang dami nang gumagawa nito, especially in the US. So siguro, let me just go back to, okay. I have, kasi nauna na yung question and answer natin. So, but I will send this to you as well. So, Soraya, you have, sorry, display settings. Hold on. There are a lot of project-based learning resources online. Unang-una pa lang, for those who said that they haven't received any training, yung first resource that I listed there is a free online self-paced course on project-based approaches. And it's one of the courses developed by Intel Teach. So if you can visit that site, you don't need to sign up. You can go through the course for free. No? And then there's also a checklist for teachers on what you need. But I would suggest the third and the second, which is PBL Works. That's where I got most of the resources I have. They're an education institute which has studied and made research, done a lot of research on project-based learning for so many years. So it's curated already. There, if you sign up for their system, which is for free, you can also download a lot of tools, a lot of templates that you can use. Of course, since you also have to take it, you have to take it in a way that it's not prescriptive, meaning these are really just suggested approaches, because considering that the approaches were developed for the US, iba yung kanilang learning standards and learning objectives, kailangan nating i-adjust yan, definitely, based on what the K-12 curriculum requires. And lastly, Global SchoolNet. When one of the things that we did with World Links, with Soraya's teachers then, when she was still with Cordillera Regional Science High School, was we worked on what we call telecollaborative projects, where we had the teachers plan and have their students join projects which allowed them to collaborate with a school, for example, in another country. So merong ganong option. Kasi nga, right now, there are a lot of projects that have students from different countries work on a specific problem or put together a specific output, no? And then it gives your students a sense of achievement if you have them do that. And then to have their outputs published online, or all the more. Di ba? Siyempre nakikita nila it's something that they're going to be proud of. So you check out globalschoolnet.org. That has a list of projects that you can consider doing with your students. So if you want something na may element ng ganon, na telecollaboration, Global SchoolNet would have the list for you. Kasi otherwise, you never know, kasi at least yung Global SchoolNet, they choose the projects that they put there. So I guess that's it, unless you have, more questions, or any additional inputs, for example, from Soraya. Was I clear?
Yes naman, Liezl. The presentation on the different standards, no, nakakatulong din kasi yon to formulate the entire project. So it is actually very much aligned to K-12. There was a post kanina whether how is this aligned to K-12. If you look at the framework of K-12, very clear that it says that one of the goals is for learners to be 21st century skilled, which actually well, of course, eto nga, the project-based learning is getting into dahil nga yung mga skills of collaboration, communication, creativity very much is there. So tamang-tama nga lang naman, it just takes a little creativity of the teacher not to be very boxed on yung routine na laging ginagawa ng teacher out of the whole school year. So that's the challenge to us teachers who will be doing this. And much of what I have gotten from the learners whom we did this, after they're all working right now. Many of the learners who have undergone
the projects
10 years ago are very much into the work. And if there is one thing that they truly remember from their learnings in high school, one among them is how they did project-based learning together with learners that they have collaborated outside of their own school. So they have local partners in here in Trinidad, and as well as they have partners in Romania. And that was where the collaboration happened. And those are things that they actually right now remember as to the skill that they have gathered. Hindi yung, I think they have forgotten what I taught them about, how to write something else. Because now they can Google that. No, they can find that online, but the skills of the 21st century is something that can be nurtured in project-based learning. Thank you very much, Liezl, for this chance to have been with you and discuss project-based learning.
I will share with Harris the PowerPoint and the list of resources. Kasi I mentioned some of the participants mentioned that hindi nila makita. Pero we'll share it with them para they can go. I specifically would like to recommend to you doing the Intel Teach Elements project-based resources, about project-based approach course. It will help you if you haven't done, if you have actually gotten project-based learning training before. It's not something that you can learn like in an hour, like right now. This is really more to, give you some ideas on how we can think of ways to help our students learn and also prepare for the next school year, because I know my heart is with you, that I know that it's going to be difficult for the public school system, but we'll get there, and hopefully the parents will also bring some understanding to be a bit more patient, because everything that we're going through is mahirap, it's difficult. So anyway, so I think if there aren't any more questions, I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you, Sir, for giving me this opportunity. I know it's been a while, but I do hope that I can still, if you need me to discuss other things, just let me know. Para hindi din nagiging stagnant yung aking knowledge about these things, because I've been doing this for quite some time now. So good luck and thank you, everyone.
Once again, thank you, Ma'am Liezl, for this chance that we had with you. So, and please keep safe. We will get in touch if there are other questions that we are not able to go through in this webinar. I can send them to you, and maybe we can share it back to our teachers. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's have a quick break, 5 minutes, and we have our second presentation. No? Our second presentation is from our learning resource officer, Sister Chris, who will share with us some very interesting tips on social media etiquette and how to be a responsible social media user. Yeah, so with that, Ms. Asun, are you still on board?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So we'll have a 5-minute break, ma'am. Okay, so to all the participants, we'll have a 5-minute break. After 5 minutes, we have to resume for the next session.